two, one. Okay, welcome to King Connections podcast. I'm your host, King, and I have the honor and the privilege to be joined by Michael Strong. How you doing today, Michael?
I'm terrific. How you doing, King?
I'm doing great. Thank you for investing the time and energy to be a part of the podcast. And I definitely appreciate all the hard and great work that you're doing. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show, because the purpose of the podcast is to highlight the excellent work that the small micro businesses who have adopted the conscious capitalism principles, they moving with a higher purpose type activities, give them an opportunity to talk about best practices, some of the work they're doing, and also build connections with other like-minded individuals who may be in alignment with those goals and those values. So with that being said, my first question I always like to begin with is what is what do you see as your purpose in life, Michael?
Wonderful question, King. Thank you. My purpose is to help young people develop into powerful, capable human beings.
That's an excellent answer. Now, my question now, when you say that, that brings another question in mind is what inspires you to have that as your purpose? What motivated you to want to have that as a purpose?
So, first of all, of course, if we can help the next generation have a better life, everything else gets better. Also, I just love learning, and so I love to share my love of learning with young people. And then finally, I enjoy it. I really enjoy working with young people. So all of these different motivations complement each other.
Absolutely. Now, notice you created an organization or a school called the Socratic Experience. And so, what would you say is the mission behind a Socratic Experience?
Lifelong happiness and well-being for our young people. So, our purpose is for them to be happy and well throughout their life. And of course, it's a big ambition, but we're always focused on what will it take for them to lead a great life.
Excellent. I'm always interested in finding out, was there a pivot point in your life where you decided to say, this direction I was going in and this calling came along, and then you kind of pivoted over to want to create the Socratic Experience? If so, what inspired you to do that?
So I've been in education for about 35 years. So I've been on this particular path for a long time, but I was in graduate school and was considering becoming an academic, a professor. But I was working with actually inner city kids in Chicago at the time, and I loved it. And then I moved to Alaska to train teachers in Socratic dialogue. And I was still intending to complete my PhD and go into academia. But it was like liberating prisoners. I would go into a classroom. So part of it is, I get to ask kids questions to get them thinking. And many kids are unhappy in school. So 75% of high school students are unhappy. 2/3 are disengaged. So you go into most classrooms and it's not a happy place. But I would go in and ask questions and get a conversation going. And it really was like liberating prisoners. They would become so happy and vibrant and alive. And that really had me committed to staying in education, was seeing that what my colleagues and I were doing was really transforming the experience of young people from unhappy and disengaged to happy, flourishing, and engaged. And how could I say no at that point?
Absolutely. Well, we're definitely thankful that you did say yes at that point, and all the great work that you're doing. Now, one of the things in doing my research on you, you talk about the importance of creating a community at the Socratic Experience. And I'm a big person behind community. So I kind of wanted to find out, how did you go about creating a community, and talk a little bit about that as well.
Oh, that's a great question. So first, one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this is, everybody needs community, but teens really need community. One of the largest risk factors for adolescent dysfunction is if they're disconnected from school. Basically, if kids are connected to parents and school, they're much less likely to have anxiety, depression, suicide, substance abuse, violence, teenage pregnancy, you name it. Healthy relationships are well-being. And so we're all about healthy relationships. One of the things we do is simply train young people to treat each other well. And of course, some people spontaneously do. But, if somebody's being insulting or rude or unpleasant or negative, we call them out on it. But we also, one of the things we do is in the Socratic dialogue, we have a debriefing at the end where we go around and ask everybody, what was most valuable for you and what was most frustrating for you. And part of what that does is it gives us a feedback mechanism for hearing exactly what might not have worked. And we're totally open to what was frustrating. Oh, because we don't know if we're leading. How do you know? You might like something we do and somebody else doesn't. Let's create a feedback mechanism. So we kind of normalize this observing and commenting on our experiences group, and really encourage dialogue, not only about the learning itself, but also about the group experience. Different people are sensitive in different ways. I've had middle school groups say they love to insult each other, and I'm not into insults. But part of this is some people are really sensitive. Some people like to be rough and tumble when they have conversations. And so instead of saying this is the one right way, we try to get a conscious, deliberate process going where the kids are involved in figuring out what is healthy community to them. And then if there are disputes, let's go ahead and be open and discuss these disputes openly. So I would say discussing conflict openly is a huge part of developing a healthy community. So I could go on, but that's a little glimpse of what we're doing there.
Well, no, I appreciate that answer. And, as you were talking, I was thinking about the fact that I'm working on building a conscious community model here in Baltimore City, really utilizing real estate and business development as the anchors of that, where we'll buy real estate, we develop a block of properties, and make the culture of living in those properties based on stakeholder orientation. Everybody values from that. And Baltimore City also is suffering from a lot of issues with schools. And so my question would it be a way to bring a school or a model similar to Socratic experience here to Baltimore City in our Conscious Community Initiative?
So that's a really big and exciting question. First, I think community development is going to be one of the biggest industries of the 21st century, because I think people crave community in its ways. And I've actually been fascinated with partnering with real estate developers for precisely this reason. Schools are often an anchor tenant in a community. And if you have healthy, positive schools, then you're more likely to have healthy, positive communities, and vice versa. So, some of this gets into, personally, I think the constraints in regular schools make it tough. There are things you can do, but what I would want to know is exactly how much autonomy can you have in your local schools to create community? How much focus can you do? To what extent is the leader on board? Because if the leader is not on board with prioritizing community, it's not going to happen. And one of the sad things is often, in public schools, there's so much pressure now for test scores and teaching to the standards. You've probably heard about things like recess and music being kind of squeezed out.
Yes.
Really, community, adolescent well-being is being squeezed out. Child well-being is being squeezed out. And so what I would want to do is I would want to find a school leader who is uncompromising about these things and work with him or her in terms of what can we do to make community and well-being the priority. And a courageous leader can push back against, whatever people above them there are. But the other thing is, I don't know if you have charter schools in Maryland or what your options are.
We do.
Yeah, I would look for a charter school that's absolutely committed to a similar vision. I'm busy, but if you want to, let's create a charter school for your real estate development where it's all about this is healthy community in this particular residential area. I think there's a big win there.
I love it. I actually believe that's actually is critical to bringing forth the conscious community initiative that we want to have here. That's because one of the big challenges is that the fact that the community in Baltimore City is suffering from a lot of the isms, a lot of the issues that have plagued this community for years. And so what I believe now, and talking to a lot of the residents, is that it's almost sad to say, but we can't really change the adults.
Yeah.
But if we can begin to build and work with making sure the new kids are coming up and they're being taught the right way and they're being shown love. And I think that what you have built within the Socratic experience is definitely kind of model that we need here in order to really let the kids see that love is there in the education systems as well.
Oh, I'm so in on this. Again, I'm too busy to do it full time, but I would so support you in doing this. And in particular, the reason I focus on adolescents, I think most children are relatively happy, but middle school is where they can go down or they can go up. A lot of young people get involved in all kinds of negative things in 11, 12, 13. And if they are alienated from school, this goes back to the school disconnection thing, then they're much likely to be involved in negative things. On the other hand, if they find school an inviting, warm, loving, respectful community where they crave being there. I mean, there's a movement in Arizona called Love Your School. And I think every family, every child should love their school. And so my vision is, I actually have kids wanting classes over the summer. They love my school so much, they ask if we can hold classes over the summer. Right. Yeah. Imagine if you had a community, residential community in Baltimore, where the kids are like, hey, King, when can we get the summer classes going? When can we come all summer?
Love that.
Exactly.
I would love that, and we're definitely going to explore that, because I believe that it's necessary for one thing, and number two is I believe we need a program similar to what you've built, and knowing that you were one of the original founders behind the whole conscious capitalism movement, as far as the ideology and things of the nature, I think it just really it would behoove us to have your input and your advice and your I would say your consultation, whatever you offer, to bring that to fruition. We'll definitely do the heavy lifting, but definitely we would like to collaborate with you on that for sure.
Well, thank you. And just, you're the real estate developer, but done right, this could increase real estate values quite a lot.
Absolutely.
If you take, and I see this something as scaled. So if you could create a model in Baltimore that combined great school, great healthy community, and the right kind of real estate development model, then everybody makes money, every homeowner makes money, the developer makes money, maybe it helps to subsidize the school, and then at the same time you develop this as a model that can be replicated. Game changer.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things that I have gone through my career as, my company, King Connections, I look at myself as a connector, someone who builds strategic alliances and relationships. And I've seen the importance of that, especially when you have this higher purpose where you want to change the community, change the city, change the neighborhood. It's really based on the connections that you make. And I've come up with a methodology and a process, a formula for building relationships. And I'm curious to know if someone like yourself who's been in the conscious capitalism movement, who's been a part of building strong relationships and communities, do you have a process that you look for or a methodology for building relationships and establishing connections?
I mean, that's a good question. What I would say is what comes up for me first is alignment is so important. That is, often people are looking at credentials or, money and power, or people are looking at all kinds of different things. And so without quite going into the process part, I would say one of the things I've become more committed to over the years is alignment is my number one priority in any working relationship. That is, if people are aligned, miracles can happen. But no matter how expert, wealthy, powerful, yada, 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 credentials, if there's misalignment, from the get-go, then you can never kind of fix it. And so basically I see, let's get aligned people. And then there are all kinds of, ways. I'm actually looking at holacracy as an organizational technique. And so we can get into the weeds on things like that. But yeah, my first thing is let's get alignment. And then if we share a common purpose, then let's figure out all the other things.
Excellent. Excellent. Now, since many movements have now come along since benefit corporations, conscious capitalism, triple bottom line, all the sustainable business models have kind of come out in the last decade or so, and I see a movement happening. So my question would be, how do you see those organizations, these movements, aligning with social impact investors in order to kind of use that capital to implement these higher purpose, sustainable business models?
Oh, that's a great question. I guess one thing that I feel passionately about in conscious capitalism is the purpose of the entrepreneur. That is, it's about an entrepreneur serving a higher purpose and doing something that they regard as meaningful. And while I'm delighted at the movement in this direction from many different quarters, sometimes it can become sort of a checklist of things. And a lot of this is organizations trying to figure out how to scale. So, for instance, I looked at becoming a B Corp at one point, but I found it was a sort of a checklist process, and some of the checks worked and some of them didn't work for me. And so what I see is, for me, again, it's about purpose and alignment. And if any of those structures help, go for it. But if not, I think you should follow your purpose and ultimately create your own structure. And so I see this as sort of this huge movement. And actually, one of my pet peeves is I think, what you're doing in terms of transforming a community in Baltimore, absolutely one of the most important things, in the United States today. And yet often people get caught up on, details of green building or something. And it's not that green building isn't important, but, here we've got lives at stake, and you're wondering about, can you park bikes there? So that's one of my pet peeves.
Actually, that's a great point that you're making there, because knowing how to prioritize what your goals are key. We can probably in phase three get to the building of the green energy and efficient buildings and the bike lanes. But in year one, let's just agree that we're going to build a community where all stakeholders benefit, and that they have a say in that model, and that we eliminate blight and we reduce crime, and those kind of things, which is what some of the key goals are behind the Conscious Community Initiative.
Exactly. And what I find is that some of the people, all these people are well intentioned, but sometimes the people focused on the checklists, I have to remind them that just the kind of thing you're talking about is a higher priority. And exactly, some of the checklist items, maybe that's phase three. And I sometimes I feel like that structure gives me, if I'm doing something like what you're doing, and I have worked in various communities, it requires a little bit more persuasion. And so what I'm concerned about is, on the one hand, there's people that don't care about making the world a better place, and then there are people that care about making the world a better place, but they're stuck on a certain vision of that. And I want to reward kind of creative people who have a distinctive vision for making a difference. And I'm kind of an anti-rule person in general, so it's like, hey, if King is making a difference, forget the rules. How do we help him make that kind of a difference?
That's what makes you an exceptional leader, and a conscious leader, truly living the conscious leader lifestyle, not just adopting that name. Um, which will make me ask this question: what would be a great connection for you? You kind of alluded to it a little earlier, but what would be a person that you would say, this is a great connection if I were to connect you to someone?
Well, just hearing what you're doing, I'm actually really excited about connecting with you. I think to actually create a school with you is like a 3 to 5 year timeline. And of course, I don't have time to be on the ground. But this vision, I've actually been talking for 20 years. I've talked to real estate developers, and I've about the kind of model of adding value in a community through education. And I've done tiny, tiny, tiny collaborations with real estate developers. But it's complicated. The whole world of real estate is over here, and education is over here, and each of those worlds is so complicated. But insofar as our visions sound like they're pretty aligned, I'm like, hey, King is a really exciting new connection. So I'm just gonna totally validate what you're doing and say I'm excited to learn more and see if there really is a collaboration possibility here.
Well, I definitely appreciate that, and we'll definitely collaborate and build some more offline. A couple other quick questions for you as we get into the top of the hour. One of those would be, of all the great things you've accomplished in your life, you've written books, you've developed curriculum, you're creating schools, you've traveled the world. Would you say has been one of the most fulfilling for you and rewarding?
I would say the most fulfilling thing is hearing how I've inspired other people. No, on my own projects, I have my own memories, and it's often hard and complicated to use. As you know, an entrepreneur, one of my favorite definitions of an entrepreneur is you wake up and get punched in the gut every day, which
Yes.
it's not really something we want to tell young entrepreneurs, but no, it's hard. There things or problems are happening. You're trying to create something new, always tough. But then, whether it's from something I've done and or something I've written, every once in a while I get an email or Facebook message from somebody I've never heard of before, maybe, and they said that I've inspired them and they've changed their life based on something I said or did. I'm like, wow, that's nice. It's sort of like this unexpected sort of thing. And I'm sure you feel sometimes you never know on your own projects. It's always so hard, and you never know how, it doesn't go as fast. I want to go faster, better, bigger and everything. And it's always slower than I'd like. And so to hear that there's this invisible impact is just so gratifying.
Absolutely. I'm definitely one of the people that would say that they've been inspired by you and the great work that you're doing and the lifestyle that you're living. And that's really what these podcasts are designed to do. I want to connect with as many conscious leaders as I can to look at ways that we can say, instead of all of us working our own little silos, what can we do as a collaborative? What can we do to go after a wildly important goal, and then begin to show all the things we're learning? And more importantly, I want to apply those to changing the city. You know,
Mhm.
and that's where the Conscious Community Initiative was actually born, from that kind of mindset. Now, another question I would like to ask you is this. Um, I I define, because we hear the term conscious leader all the time, and and that can mean conscious in different ways, obviously, right? You could be environmentally conscious, you could be a person that's society conscious, and so I've come up with 8 virtues that I've defined myself, that I hear myself to as my true north. Not to say I'm there all the time, but that's where I will work towards. And I just want to read those off quickly and see what your thoughts are on, and that you have similar virtues.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's number one, being principle centered. Number two has been values driven. Number three has been action oriented. Number four is results focused. Number five is growth minded. Number six is servant leader. Number seven is accountability acceptor. And then number eight is having a grateful spirit. So for me, those are the 8 virtues that I want to live my life by. And I just wanted to see, that you have either similar virtues or just what your thoughts are on
No,
having virtue.
I love it. I'm aligned with all of those. I tend to just think of, making the world a better place, and then all of those things I would say are components of it. And I tend to be in many ways sort of intuitive rather than a systems person. So I need lots of systems people around me, because I'm just like, is this going to make the world a better place? And then if I need to, persuade somebody, I can say, we need to do this, 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 and this. But yeah, I'm all about the inspiration and the vision. Some of my organizations, I've described myself as chief visionary officer, and then when you get into concrete, yeah, how do we structure it? And if every organization I do, I often want input from everybody else, the whole team, in terms of these kind of virtues and values and so forth, because I want to see what resonates for them. I actually think most people have a relatively common instinct for the good, but people use different language. And so one of the things I try to do is not get caught up in the language. It's like, yeah, are we making human lives better? And if so, then what are the structures that serve that? So I kind of go from a sort of more direction oriented place, and then things like year 8, absolutely. We're doing the same team, we can use those. And if I'm working with a different team, they like a different word, that's okay. Words don't matter. Are we heading in the right direction?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, my last 2 questions would be this. Um, Now, I believe that our success in life are all about the relationships that we make, the connections that we have. And so I've come up with a term called a king connection. And a king connection is not necessarily a play on my name or my company. It's an individual who has reached heights where either socially, influential, financial capital, but just their level of acceptance in the world. They're someone that people that you admire, someone that if you were to meet with them and they added you to their inner circle, it would bring a great change in your life and in your business. Like, for example, for me, that person would be Magic Johnson. If I can actually meet, and I intend to meet Magic Johnson one day, he would fit several roles: as an advisor, as a coach, as a connector, as an influencer, just from all the success he's had in his business. So with that being said, is there a king connection that you have in mind? And if so, who would that be?
That's a really great connection and a question. And I guess what comes up for me is the most important thing is to be seen and understood by the person. So I've known a lot of very famous people. I've met about a dozen Nobel laureates. I've met cabinet members of various governments around the U.S. I've known probably 10 billionaires, and so I know a lot of famous people. And so for me, it's more a matter of, do they see and understand what I'm doing? Because sometimes I've been excited about, oh, meet this billionaire, and then if and I'll go ahead. A lot of famous people are stuck in their own world. I don't want to be too critical, but they're just all about themselves. And you can see, as you get famous and rich and powerful, everybody flatters you all the time. And there was somebody who was once the head of the Ford Foundation, and he said he would never eat a bad lunch again, and no one would ever tell him the truth again. And I think that's what happens to people when they get a certain place. And so I guess for me, what comes up is it would depend on whether or not that person really was ready to have a conversation with me. So I know I'm not giving you a good answer, but yeah, I'm always, and I've got a lot of great friends. So for me, it's more about finding people who see and understand what I'm working on. And if they're rich, famous, or powerful, great. But if not, again, alignment. I go back to, and part of the thing with alignment is so important is having met people who, in some sense, if I pandered to what they wanted to do, they could have done all sorts of things for me, but they're about them and I'm about me, and we're doing different things, and that's okay. But yeah, for me, it's all about. I'll take a 18-year-old kid who really gets what I'm up to. I'll take a call from him rather than a billionaire who's clueless and doesn't care. That's sort of extreme, but you know what I mean?
No, that's an excellent answer. And to your point, I think it's everything about the leverage, right? So the person that you're meeting sees himself here and see you here, they're not going to listen to what you're going to say. They're not going to be present. They're not going to be engaged. But you're absolutely right. Having that person truly in alignment and engaged is really the goal behind that relationship and that connection. So thank you for that answer. That definitely is something that I actually consider. And my last question for you would be this, and I'm always curious what people's answers are on this question as well. I always ask my guests, and you're an author, and I know you've written several books as well as I know you're constantly a reader as well. What book would you recommend to our listening audience right now? Would you say this is a book I would recommend that if you really want to, and it could be forever. I don't want to put it in any kind of context, but whatever your spirit tells you to do, say today, what book would that be that you would recommend for our listening audience?
Well, maybe I'll go for a classic. Every once in a while, I'm reminded of Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. And it's sort of a corny, written in the 1930s. Napoleon Hill went and interviewed all these great 19th, early 20th century entrepreneurs and asked them how they developed their lives, became so successful. And the title is even cheesier than the substance. I would say the substance is how to have a personal vision and commit to it. And, again, it's old fashioned, but I think Think and Grow Rich. I've actually met a number of young people, again, 17, 18, 20, 23, who discovered this book and it changed their lives. And so I'll go with Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, a classic that's underappreciated. Get through the corniness and the old-fashioned nature, but I think there are a lot of beautiful nuggets in there.
No, I agree with you 100%. I read from Think and Grow Rich on a daily basis. I think it's one of those books that you study and not just read once and put aside, because as Napoleon Hill talks about, when you read it multiple times, it's not that you learn something different. You learn something new about yourself, not in the information itself. You just how you're applying it and how you're processing it changes each time you read it.
What a beautiful coincidence that I'm thinking of that book and you actually read it every day. I think it shows that book is powerful.
And that we're in alignment, and our goals and our purposes in life. So again, as we begin to wrap this thing up, because I know you have other things to do, and I definitely want to thank you for your time. But I want to give you an opportunity. Is there, in addition to your contact information that you might want to share, website, email, whatever you want to share with our listening audience, but is there any kind of words of wisdom you want to depart that you want to leave with our listening audience as well?
Yeah, so my website for my school is the socraticexperience.com, a virtual school for children grades 3 through 12. We help children discover and develop their genius, entrepreneurial, creative, intellectual. We work with a very wide range of children. I've worked with, all kinds of children, and I believe every individual child has a genius, and it's our job as parents and educators to help crank that up. Also follow me on LinkedIn. Happy to accept invitations on LinkedIn. Michael Strong, Socratic Experience. I'm very active on Facebook. I'm married to a beautiful African Senegalese entrepreneur, so probably the only Michael Strong with a beautiful Senegalese entrepreneur next to him on Facebook. Very active there. Also active on Twitter. And yeah, I would say believe in yourself and do whatever you can to surround yourself with a community. Again, going back to community, we're the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. If you're not being supported by the people around you in terms of living your dream, find people who will support you in living your dream. And it's hard, punched in the gut every day, but it's a wonderful life despite that.
Well, again, Michael, I definitely believe that. I would definitely follow that advice. And I want to thank you again for your investment of time and energy. And I appreciate you for being who you are. Thank you for joining us on King Connections.
Thank you. Likewise, King. Delight talking to you. Thank you. And I look forward to following up. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.